Looking for an EHR that's built for the way therapists work? From automated scheduling and billing to customizable notes and treatment plans, Simple Practice gives you everything you need right at your fingertips. Learn more at simplepractice.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Powbox, a HIPAA-compliant email security platform built specifically for healthcare providers. Powbox helps therapists secure every email they send and receive through Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. Our listeners can get $250 off an annual plan with promo code MODERN.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhalm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our practices, the things that go on with our clients. And it's Eating Disorder Awareness Month. And we all know diet culture is exhausting. It's a never-ending cycle of rules and guilt and chasing perfect bodies. And what about when that difficult relationship with food is not about dieting at all? So this week, we're going to talk about how we can work with things like ARFID and the intuitive eating process. And we are joined once again by our very good friend, Robyn Goldberg. Been on the podcast a couple of times before, and wonderful dietitian. And thank you so much for spending some time with us again here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Curt and Katie. Excited to talk about this, especially since we are in the month of eating disorder awareness education. I think there's not enough conversations centered around ARFID, and it's more common than we realize. Oftentimes pushed aside as, oh, this individual has always been, quote unquote, picky or fussy or difficult, I hear, around food. But sometimes it goes deeper than that.
I'm really looking forward to jumping into this conversation. But before we do, I want to ask the question that we ask all our guests, which is, who are you and what are you putting out into the world?
Thank you. My name is Robyn Goldberg. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and a certified eating disorder dietitian and consultant. I have a private practice in Los Angeles for 20 years where I see kids, teens, and adults, body image issues, eating disorders, and medical issues. And I help people repair the relationships they have around food in their bodies. And like Curt was saying, this never-ending topic and exhausting ideas around food and body and striving for this quote-unquote thin ideal and a place that a person's not maybe naturally meant to be can be very taxing and lead them to feel confused. And I really like to clarify misconceptions and help a person really work on this place of body acceptance as opposed to chasing an ideal that may not be suitable for them.
We've used the acronym a couple of times at the beginning of this episode of ARFID, which stands for Avoidant and Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. Is that correct?
Yes, Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, correct.
Okay. So before we get into that specifically, I do want to talk more about intuitive eating in general for our audience to be able to kind of talk about what some of the core principles are for clients that struggle with things such as emotional eating. Some of the core principles that are out there include honor your hunger. What does this look like for therapists? What does it look like for dietitians in talking with clients? And how can our audience reinforce this?
So even just touching upon the principles of intuitive eating, an individual, and I like to say this because Elise Rush and Evelyn Tribole always say this, an individual does not have to read the book in order, follow the principles in order. You might say, you know what, I'm really just focusing on rejecting diet culture. What does that look like for me? I think as a therapist, it's important that we resolve our own issues around food and body, especially if we're doing any of this work, because oftentimes self-disclosure, and we all know self-disclosure is only appropriate when it can benefit the client. So I hear too often from clients, they have providers that don't work in the space and they'll say, oh, well, this is what I would suggest you do, or this is what works for me. It's sort of like, how is that going to help that individual? Really learning how to not have biases around various foods and food groups, but also, look, everyone has a food regime in regards to what they follow, what they eat, what they don't eat. Some people don't think twice about it. But at the end of the day, when you're, looking at these different principles, whether it's learning how to honor hunger, paying attention with the fullness levels, like, satisfaction factors without getting into all the principles, essentially, I think really at the end of the day, it's as a provider looking at what is my role in this and how does my communication with my client impact what choices they're making or what they're thinking after this meeting.
Maybe at a high level, it would help those of us who are not as much in the space to talk a little bit about the core principles so that we all are kind of starting at a common ground, because I think that would be helpful for me as well.
So, touching upon this briefly, so as I'd mentioned before, rejecting the diet mentality. We're bombarded with dieting messages all day long. It feels very overwhelming and confusing for folks when they're eating because oftentimes we second guess the choices that we're making centered around food. So it's really coming from a place of neutrality where a person can be curious and explore what these various foods taste like, what they feel like in our body, what they smell like, the presentation. And again, I'm just touching peripherally on, rejecting, diet mentality, learning how to honor hunger and pay attention to what that looks like. Hunger does not have to be felt in our belly. It could be, I am irritable. I have a hard time concentrating. I have a headache. I'm tired. I'm tuning out easily. Also, feeling that your energy level's constantly down. I always like to say, you might actually be hungry. You might actually be tired. Like, what is the difference in that feeling? So that's a very in-depth conversation too. Really being able to make peace with all foods. You might not like all foods, but knowing you can go to a restaurant, you could go on a vacation, and you're able to find something wherever you go versus saying, no, there's nothing here I can eat because I don't eat fast food or I won't eat fried foods. It's like sometimes, you know what? I just need food to survive. That might not be my preferred food choice, but knowing like this too shall pass. Maybe it wasn't as awful as I thought it was. I I think sometimes there's these rigid, narrow beliefs, and therefore it paralyzes an individual from being able to go with the flow and be flexible and adaptable in all, eating situations. Challenging the food police, that is a big one. Whether they are messages we've heard growing up, they're messages that like I was listening to someone the other day who told me that, Robyn, I think, well, if I'm eating a specific food, maybe I shouldn't be, or my rights have been revoked, or I don't deserve it, or I'm not worthy to eat food that tastes delicious. Like I'm required to eat these same 5 foods and really being able to challenge that voice and look at where it originated from and when it began is really important. I think the food police for if not all of us, many of us, it really shapes how we approach our choices.
As a therapist, your time is precious, and Simple Practice helps you protect it. Their new AI-powered note taker creates structured progress notes in minutes, so you can wrap up sessions and move on with your day. Easy-to-use billing features take the hassle out of getting paid, even when insurance is involved.
Another great perk? Scheduling is simple for you and your clients with unlimited automated appointment reminders. Make the most of every day with an all-in-one practice management solution that lets you focus on the work that matters most, connecting with your clients. Join over 225,000 practitioners who trust Simple Practice to keep their day running smoothly. Start today at simplepractice.com.
Learning how to feel your fullness. I think this is another tough one for many people because there's different levels of fullness, just like there's different levels of hunger. It's looking at what time of the day and what influences the fullness level that you're either intentionally striving to be at or that you're naturally reaching. That takes a certain level of consciousness and awareness and insight with paying attention to oneself. Discovering the satisfaction factor is actually seen as the most important principle of intuitive eating because a person can eat different foods and be more aware of their hunger and fullness signals. But knowing when we're satiated, when we're content, when we're satisfied, it could be with consuming less because it was the flavor and the taste that we were seeking and it really hit the spot. And what's providing satisfaction is a question I always like to ask because we want to feel satisfied. If we're not, then we're going to think about, even if we're not hungry, if we're full, what the next food will be that we're eating or when we're eating again. So it's nice to be able to eat and carry on with our day. So coping with your emotions without using food is also a big one, especially if a person turns to food to suppress or avoid any kind of uncomfortable feeling. Sitting and acknowledging our emotions is tough. That's why people see clinicians like Katie and Curt, because really to be able to process, to being able to identify what the feelings are and looking at how we respond when these different emotions and feelings arise for us, as opposed to looking at food to escape what those look like. Being able to respect our body, that's another very difficult one for many people because, like Curt was saying early on, there's these standards or unrealistic expectations to have a body shape or size that either A, might not be appropriate for your body, B, is not attainable or sustainable long term to be able to maintain. And I always like to say, if you're having to go through these unnatural extreme measures to have your body be at this specific place, it's probably not the place that your body is supposed to be. So looking at how I can appreciate and respect, it doesn't mean I love every inch of myself. Really being able to say like a well-lived body is a body that's able to actually get rest, take time off, hang out, doesn't have to be on the move all the time, but really looking how to treat it well with respect and kindness and speak to it in a way that can be loving and nurturing and supportive, I think is super, super important. I like to use, the next term, joyful movement or intuitive movement, because exercise for many has a negative connotation. People perceive, oh, I have to go on the treadmill. That's not fun. That feels like a chore. Versus as a child, I think of running around the playground, going on the jungle gym and the monkey bars. Like, that's fun. That's intuitive movement. It could be, I enjoy vacuuming and dusting and gardening, and that's what joyful movement is to me. So really looking at what that looks like for yourself. Gentle nutrition is actually like one of the last principles of intuitive eating, because the whole goal and premise is to be able to learn how to legalize all foods and food groups and not have, the different messages we hear about these different foods based on diet culture and society that you both were referencing. So really being able to work on exploring and approaching our bodies and food through a different lens is important before we're getting to the gentle nutrition piece.
For a lot of the intuitive eating principles, it's dismantling rigid rules. What's your advice to therapists who are working with clients struggling with anxiety and loss of control when letting go of those food rules that have been so comforting, or maybe the one area of life where they do actually have some control over their life?
So when an individual is struggling with anxiety, and if they are having these rigid rules around food, one of the things I always like to suggest is, can I delay or postpone eating when I am feeling anxious, because oftentimes the individual's eating at a faster pace. They're not paying attention to the eating experience. And like you were saying, Kurt, they're wanting to look at what they can control in their life. And perhaps even breaking up the eating experience bite by bite, where, and this is very hard. Like if you're feeling anxious, you want to do things in a rapid manner, but even to be able to say, well, let me pause a couple bites into it and just even look at, what am I noticing about the food? Did I notice, was it crunchy? Was it too salty? Did I love the sweetness? What is it that I'm hoping to accomplish or achieve by eating this food? Really coming from a place of neutrality when exploring. Like I always like to say, being a researcher. A researcher is open minded, they're flexible, they're curious, and being able to approach food that way when the level of anxiety and stress can diminish. Because if you're in the heat of it, it's going to be hard to ask yourself these questions and slow down and evaluate where you're at.
I'm hearing a lot of mindfulness and slowing down, being neutral, trying to be more of an observer. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is I think that there are a lot of us that don't have great interoception. There might be difficulties with slowing down when we're eating, or even eating lots of different foods, or to the point of ARFID as well. And so when we start coming up against those types of things, how do you address that with folks? And what are the things that we should be aware of when someone's not able or doesn't feel capable of doing more intuitive eating or mindful eating?
Yeah, so mindful eating and intuitive eating, there is overlap, but they are different.
Okay.
With someone who's neurodivergent, one of the things I always like to suggest is not doing something else when eating, because it's hard enough to be conscious and present if, when you're in that place, let alone if you have the TV on, or you're watching YouTube, or you're chatting with someone. So I think for many clients that do not have that interoceptive awareness, and that's like a big thing with intuitive eating too, is really like being able to make a list of foods that you're willing to try, you would never even go near, that you're considering, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, I'm super scared of this food. 1 is like, no, not at all, maybe. Being able to look at what it would take to be able to just like hold the food, or go down the aisle in the grocery store where it is, or smell it, or look at it, to even begin having an exposure with it. Because I think too, Katie, I feel like, I don't know if you're asking this yet, but I know it's coming, is with a lot of these folks, they're requiring more structure and guidance and hand holding, versus I think people oftentimes assume with intuitive eating, it's like, I'm off, in the, wild blue yonder. It's like, well, it starts for many people feel like I can be brave and approach food that way. Others are like, I need more hand holding and support. Like, let's just hang out in the shallow end of the pool. Like, I don't want to go into the deep end or the midsection. I just want to hang out here for a bit. And I think through exposure therapy and really being able to talk about these different foods, and being able to be with someone that would be supportive to help you even just like sit with it, go with it. Like, okay, I'm going to, I don't know if I can take a bite yet, but one of the things I do say to clients is, before they rule it out, I want you to commit to a minimum of 3 bites before you formulate an opinion about if this is a food that you see yourself working in or would want to work in. Because it's easy to stay in your cocoon of eating the foods that you like, that are safe, that work for you. It's scary to try something different, especially when you might have a sensory disorder, certain textures you're drawn to. There's a lot of fear centered around these foods, even if you've not had a negative experience. It's like our imagination can really take off and make us feel like it's like someone's trying to poison us.
If you're a therapist in private practice, email is probably one of your biggest compliance risks. What most therapists don't know is that Gmail and Outlook are not fully compliant on their own. Powbox helps you secure every email you send and receive by ensuring outbound email is automatically encrypted and delivered directly to your client's inbox. No portals or passwords required. You can do all this without changing your tools or how you work. Powbox works seamlessly with your existing Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 account.
Powbox also protects your inbox from phishing and malicious emails that target healthcare practices. Setup is fast, there's no training required, and Powbox's US-based team is ready to help if you need it. As a Modern Therapist Survival Guide listener, you can get $250 off an annual Powbox plan. Just visit powbox.com, that's Paubox, and use promo code MODERN to get started.
I want to switch our conversation now to focusing on ARFID. And for those who are unfamiliar with it, how would you describe it being different than some of the other eating disorders that many people are potentially more familiar with?
So, ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, this is known as the quote unquote picky eater. This is not anything centered around weight or dieting. Oftentimes, the individual is on the spectrum. They've had something traumatic happen to them. Perhaps food was caught in their throat when they were young or even older. It's been trauma that they've experienced for many, and I see this less and less now, but for many, they've been getting their nutrition through what's called enteral nutrition because they've just like as young children, they've not been staying on their growth grid, and it's been hard to keep their intake up because that's oftentimes the goal when a child is so young, to be able to keep their intake up. It doesn't matter if they're consuming the same 5 foods, but really looking at what has led them to be so picky. And for many people I see, like I have many adults I see that have ARFID, and I have some kids, but the adults will say, I think I've been this way since I was very young, and this is what I know. And now they're wanting to address it because it's affecting their social life. They're finding to go out with people for work or to go on a date or to travel. They're paralyzed. They think of like, well, gosh, I don't know how I can go to another country because I don't know what the food would be like. So with this, really, the texture, for many, they're so dialed into the seasonings, the spices, the flavors, like over COVID when different products were not available and would sell out. I think of a client of mine that his mother would say, Robyn, I didn't know what to do because the chicken finger recipe that, my child would eat, he would say they changed the formulation. I can taste that, there's pepper, or this is more crumbly, or there's a weird aftertaste. I mean, things that the average person wouldn't be aware of. And that's true and valid. So really looking at how to be open to try a different chicken nugget or other foods. It's definitely a long and tough journey.
My impression of ARFID is that there's a repulsion, that there's almost an inability to try new foods or to at some points eat at all. And it seems like it requires quite a bit to be able to get past that. Sometimes there's, it seems like there's different theories about easing into it or, kind of forcing the issue, those types of things. So it feels very different than anorexia, right? There's potentially similar presentations when someone comes into your office, but there are very different reasons. I'm controlling food based on calories and a diet I am repulsed by foods and I can't eat right now. And so you talked a little bit about doing exposure, which I think can feel probably life-changing, but also very overwhelming and potentially dangerous in and of itself. What are some of the other treatment options? What are some of the ways that, as a dietitian, you might approach this? I'm just curious. I know that this would be out of the scope of therapists, but I think for therapists to be able to understand and refer appropriately to dietitians, it might be good to understand the treatment options and kind of the different ways you might work with someone that's really struggling with ARFID.
Sure. And I will just say, Katie, there's therapists I know that this is what they specialize in and do.
Sure.
So, I mean, exposure therapy is really the tried and true way. It's like you could talk about a food all day long, but until you're physically embracing it, looking at it, seeing it, smelling it, touching it, tasting it, I have found personally fast, like, oh, let's just, is not a long term way to be successful. It's really like I think of different clients where it's like we'll have weeks that we're talking about various foods in preparation for them to actually try it, whether it's in my office with a friend, with their family, somewhere. I actually did an exposure with a client recently, and we've been talking about going to the farmer's market. And, this client, has all these like ideas about, all these different, produce items. So over summertime, and I had picked a small farmer's market that I felt like would be less anxiety provoking as opposed to a larger farmer's market. When I'm saying smaller, where it's like Westwood Farmer's Market, where it's like one block and there's maybe like 5 or 6 produce it's very small. It's not like going to Santa Monica or Hollywood. And so we had a plan, and I had said, like, this is when the peaches and pluots and nectarines were out, and these were, vendors and people I was very familiar with, and I had said, like, and I always tell this to clients, and sometimes it gives them reassurance, I think, especially when we're out in the world versus, like, in the office, is I will be your shield. I'm gonna taste everything before I suggest to you, like, this client knew, okay, we're gonna be trying stone fruits, like, he hadn't had it in maybe, like, 20 years and didn't remember it, but knew it was not anything that he wanted. So, as I'm going through with the samples, all the different options. So, even just watching the like hyperventilating, the anxiety, like the emotions literally like on one sleeve, like in motion. Because you can hear someone describe it, but witnessing it is very, very different. And it was like maybe after the second or third sample, I, had watched my client like walk away to just like remove themselves from that space. And we were talking about like what was coming up for him. And this is an adult person. And, finally is like a way to like buffer and calm himself down. Just see, because there's all kinds of vendors at a farmer's market. There's, bread people and soup people and Mediterranean. And he just like walk off to one, and I would just like go. And then he's like, okay, I'm ready for the next. And literally, I think in these types of situations, like I know in this last one, it resulted in my client trying other things that he hadn't planned on, not in the produce. It was like in the soups, it was in the breads, the baked goods, and like buying some things. And we were just talking the other day about like, okay, I'm getting ready to do another one with you, Robyn.
What are the absolute red flags, nutritional, physical, psychological, behavioral, that a therapist should look for that indicates that a client's restrictive eating is likely ARFID and requires immediate RD referral?
That's a very good question, Curt, because I'm thinking of someone in treatment. This client was mistaken for having anorexia nervosa, and he actually had ARFID and OCD and a bunch of other diagnoses. I think first and foremost, the individual will only eat these, same handful of foods, but maybe they cannot go out in the world. They are not like, they've lost a significant amount of weight. They're so rigid, when you're saying red flags, I mean, there can be many, and oftentimes it takes a lot of different evaluations to be able to come up with, like, they have ARFID. Like, I think this person initially, when I had started with him, I thought like, "Oh, definitely has anorexia nervosa," and then as I got to know him and see, like, no, there's a lot of, and it was down the road, it was like, "You know what? I don't really care physically where I'm at or what I look like. I just know I'm having a hard time expanding from what I'm eating," and his family would say, like, even just the hoarding, like, there are these safe foods, and you can open up his closet or desk drawer, and there'd be rancid foo like, there'd be things stored there. So, I think behaviorally, it's not just the presentation of how they look, it's really what's happening behind closed doors too, and whatever's being reported, because he never reported that, and also too, I would hear from the family, like, Robyn, if, I'm asking him to open a jar of tomato sauce, let's say, because I can't open it. Like, she did not know this was with the ARFID and OCD until later. She'd watch and put like surgical gloves on, like, cannot touch it, cannot be near it. I'm gonna wear nose, but like really taking it to a place like, okay, is that normal? There's more stuff going on.
It seems like with all of the sensory issues, the fear of aversive consequences, lack of interest, it feels like it's a hard fit to put intuitive eating into a treatment modality. And so we're running very low on time. So maybe in kind of a quick way, how do you adapt intuitive eating for folks who have ARFID and or interoception issues, difficulty with letting go of rigid rules? Like what are the additional pieces that might be helpful just to understand about the changes that might need to be made to the intuitive eating
Good
model?
question. Yes, because that they may not ever get to be an intuitive eater. It's requiring more structure and guidance and specifics, and even through those meals and snacks that they are eating, where we can then look at the pausing and asking, like, how is something tasting or feeling? Like, what would you consider doing differently? So it's working within a framework that is within what they're doing, but gradually adding other foods in. But really, it's being very gingerly and mindful about it, because seeing that there's so many thoughts and fears and hesitations, especially if they're not able cognitively to evaluate on that level. They just think of like, "Okay, it's in front of me, I'm eating." So we'll talk about, like, how they were feeling before they ate it or after they ate it, or what they liked about it, what they disliked about it, really breaking it down to micro changes.
I want to thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about where people can find out more about you and the work that you do and your very wonderful writings and podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. So I'm on my website's askaboutfood.com. I'm on Instagram, it's Robyn with a Y, Goldberg, RDN. My book is The Eating Disorder Trap. It's available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble. It's an audio, ebook, and paperback. I have a podcast, The Eating Disorder Trap Podcast, which is on iTunes, Spotify, and it drops every other week. And yes, I'm all over the internet and would be happy to be a resource and answer any questions for your listeners.
And we will include links to all of Robin's things in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. Follow us on our social media, join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with these conversations. Follow us on LinkedIn and Substack to do all of the wonderful things over there too. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy and Robyn Goldberg.
Over 225,000 practitioners already use Simple Practice to grow their business and simplify admin tasks that take time away from their clients. Isn't it time your EHR worked as hard as you do? Find out more at simplepractice.com.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Powbox, helping therapists secure every email they send and receive. Get $250 off an annual plan with promo code MODERN. Visit powbox.com, that's PAUBOX.com, to protect your practice and your clients.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.